What are you doing in my Discord? Polluting my population in my community.
I'm so sorry, Destiny. It won't happen again. Please, just let me go, my capo, my overlord.
All right, what's
Just
up?
go again.
What do you want?
I have absolutely no idea. One of your Duderinos talked to me about a certain report that was released about 2 days ago.
Oh,
And
the
it
one.
seemed like,
Yeah. What about it?
and it seemed like you wanted to talk about it.
Fuck. Who? Can you tell me who this was so I can permanently ban him from my Discord?
Fuck! Don't put
Give
me
me
on
the
spot
name.
like
Give me the name. I thought you were in here because I thought you wanted to talk about me. People do this dumb shit where they go to someone else and go like, oh, Desi really wants to talk to you, and then they come to me like, oh, that dude really wants to talk to you, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, and then we get here and like, oh, what do you want to talk about? And then neither person has any idea like what.
I'm sorry. Man, like, come on, don't put me on the spot like this. I can't like fuck over someone, you know. Come on.
Was it Dary? Dary? It was that guy, wasn't it?
I can neither confirm nor
It
deny.
was definitely that guy. I know it was. Okay, well, what about it? What do you think about it? Did you read it? I didn't read it yet.
Yeah, I actually finished reading it. Let me just switch the volume down a little bit. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so I finished reading it about 20 hours ago, give or take. I was incredibly disappointed. It's a fairly boring piece of media. It's not even like a proper study. It's a research report, essentially financed by a think tank, done by a single researcher, and the quality of it is like exceptionally low. And I'm not saying that as one of those evil political commentators. I actually mean that the level of citations is incredibly low. The researcher, Miss Lewis, doesn't really have a theoretical framework in which she's operating, and she's just sort of spitballing as she goes, saying that, hey, there's this network of people, they stream together. I'm going to make this super arbitrary definition of what constitutes this network or not, and something, this radicalizes people. Yeah, it's boring, it's disappointing, and people shouldn't actually pay any attention to it, in my opinion.
Interesting.
Like, I saw a lot of the usual suspects already kicking up like a big fuss about it. I think it was Paul Joseph Watson, already starting Twitter threads about how this is a centralized attempt at destroying free speech on YouTube, something like that. If it is, it's an exceptionally poor one. Like,
Sure.
this really reeks of a sort of,
Just as
hey,
a
I'm an amateur.
As a quick aside before we dig into this, nothing makes me want to kill myself more than conservative dipshits complaining about freedom of speech when it comes to like social media platforms. You realize how insanely hypocritical that is, right?
I don't really deal with this issue. Enlighten me.
So in the United States, freedom of speech is extended to corporations as well, right? And if you're a corporation, you're not compelled to host any sort of like speech on your platform. The government isn't going to make you do it. So the idea that you would be the idea that you would talk about freedom of speech insofar as like Twitter or Facebook goes is just very strange to me, because if you want to compel them, at least by the government, to not ban people off of your platform, I mean, that's kind of a violation of freedom of speech in and of itself. And then if you're going to make some argument that, like, it just seems weird, because anytime people have ever complained in the past about corporations, say, polluting the environment or fucking over workers or engaging in horrible business practices, conservatives will always say, oh, well, the free market will, dictate that somebody else will come up. Oh, the free market will provide a solution. Oh, what's wrong? Healthcare is shit. Well, a free market doctor will come along and do the surgery at half the cost, even though these things don't really happen as easily as people would like them to. So it's kind of funny now that they're getting fucked over by the free market, by corporations that are too big to fail or whatever. Now all of a sudden they're crying and screeching and reeing that some businesses might be a little bit too large for the overall health of the, the economy or society in general. It's just something that really bothers me.
One of the sort of common arguments you will then hear is that Google or Twitter or YouTube is so big that they stop being a private entity and become a sort of network provider and sort of a semi-public thingy, because there is only YouTube to watch videos, there's only Twitter to tweet, and therefore they have a duty to uphold freedom of speech, something like that.
This isn't an argument that an intelligent a person could make. But if you're a conservative, you've completely forfeit that argument because you totally have rejected that every single time in the past. In the United States, I'll say, not in maybe in other Western countries, it's not, but in the U.S., conservatives constantly balk at that idea of something is too big or something is too monopolized or blah 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 blah, and they'll always counter with this absurd notion, this very naive notion of like, well, a free business will come up and will take over if that's actually true. If these people are bad and they've got a monopoly, what's the thing? A kid in a garage can put Microsoft out of business if he's got a good idea, right? That's what conservatives always say. So to pull the idea out now that like, well, maybe some things are actually so huge and so like embedded in society and even in government to some extent that maybe we do need to bring in a little bit of regulation here. As a conservative, you've already rejected that argument so many times in the past. I think it looks really bad to don that hat now.
You genuinely do hate conservatives, don't you?
Very much so. Like I've moved full on to like the political violence level or the real violence level when it comes to conservative people. Yeah, I think they need to be like excised from my fucking country. I think they are demonstrably fucking evil people by any moral system that most people would use. And then I just hate them because they tend to destroy the outcomes related to this country, which is what I'm concerned with. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a topic I'm not yet sort of ready to touch. I'm not prepared for this topic, but suffice to say, I'm not opposed to quote violence. To be quite honest, not only in this context, but like generally speaking, some people are just very sort of detrimental. So we want to talk about the report.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of fucked.
No problem.
Can I start? I'm just gonna kind of like, where do I start? Do I need the introduction here?
From you or for the report?
From the report, fuck. Okay, let me just start going through this, okay? Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. For a short time on January 4th, 2018, the most popular live stream video on YouTube was a broadcast dominated by white nationalists. More specifically, it was a stream by YouTubers Andy Warski and Jean facilitating a debate between a white nationalist and a libertarian. The debate topic was scientific racism, which they refer to as race realism, a contemporary incarnation of the long-standing claims that there are measurable scientific differences between races of humans. Arguing in favor of scientific racism was infamous white nationalist Richard Spencer, known for having popularized the term alt-right. Ostensibly on the other side was Carl Benjamin, a YouTuber who goes by the pseudonym Sargon of Akkad. During the broadcast, the debate became the number one trending live video worldwide on YouTube with over 10,000 active viewers. The archive version of the broadcast has been viewed an additional 475,000 times. The four participants carried out their debate via Google Hangouts, and the video lasted more than 4.5 hours. They were joined at various times by other YouTubers. During the broadcast, participants debated a range of positions popular in white supremacist communities, using academic terminology and treating the topics as theoretical discourse. They discussed, for example, whether monogamy was a development of Western culture and whether there are biological qualities that constitute whiteness. Spencer has had years of experience arguing his racial theories and spoke with more confidence than Benjamin in the live comments and through subsequent reactions on social media. Many audience members responded positively to Spencer's performance. I've never really listened to Spencer speak before, said one user with the pseudonym Nashmau, but it is immediately apparent that he's on a whole different level. More broadly, commenters praised the debate and expressed excitement about its popularity. 500,000 views in only 3 weeks. I honestly think this is a sign that people are hungry for what's good for humanity. One commenter wrote, they followed it up by stating, ethnic nationalism is freedom for everybody. This debate is part of a larger phenomenon in which YouTubers attempt to reach young audiences by broadcasting far-right ideas in the form of news and entertainment. An assortment of scholars, media pundits, and internet celebrities are using YouTube to promote a range of political positions from mainstream versions of libertarianism and conservatism all the way over to white nationalism, or all the way to overt white nationalism. While many of their views differ significantly, they all share a fundamental contempt for progressive politics, specifically for contemporary social justice movements. For this reason, I consider their collective position reactionary, as it is defined by its opposition to visions of social progress. United in this standpoint, these YouTubers frequently collaborate with and appear with others across ideological lines. Together, they have created a fully functioning media system that I call the Alternative Influence Network. Okay, I'll stop kind of like page to page. Is there anything in here that you disagree with so far, or?
There's actually two things that are, I think, sort of interesting to talk about.
Sure.
The first one is the entire framing of this research paper, of this report. The researcher is very specific about already trying to paint this picture. It's bad that Sargon of Akkad, someone that's not sort of educated in the question of race realism, had a race realist or a racist on his Google Hangout thingy, because this gives the alt-right a platform. This lets the alt-right win. The problem here is that, sure, you can't expect hardcore citations directly in the introduction, but it would be nice if she was already giving us a sort of framework. I'm following a agenda setting, a framing narrative. I'm following a priming narrative, some sort of theoretical framework, because all she did so far in the introduction is say, hey, there was this one stream. I did not like that stream. and I have a few comments, just three. I think it's 3 or 2 comments, something like that, to sort of bolster my narrative. That is a somewhat weak start off to a report because it doesn't actually suggest any sort of empirical findings.
Okay, sure. I would agree that the empirical findings thus far are pretty weak. The only real numbers we've been given are the amount of views on a YouTube video and a couple of comments, which aren't necessarily representative. But I will take issue with a couple things you said here. So I think that her claim that it's bad that Sargon of Akkad had a race realist on his Google Hangout stems more from the fact that he seemed ill-equipped to debate that point. And I think that her supporting arguments here were the ideas... Spencer's had years of experience arguing against racial theories and spoke with more confidence than Benjamin in the live comments, and through subsequent reactions to social media, many audience members responded positively to Spencer's performance. This word many is a little weaselly. Maybe if there would have been some sort of polling or something, it would have been better. Maybe it would actually be better to refer to the, let's see, Spencer versus Sargon YouTube video. Maybe it would actually be better, although it's still kind of to refer to the likes, the thumbs up and the thumbs down on the video, because I see that the video is thumbs down 1.6 thousand times and thumbs up 17,000 times. So maybe appealing to something like this in the top rated comments might be a little bit more data driven. So like this top comment here, past Sticks and Hammer, who's an e-celebrity, right? This top comment here, oh my God, I rewatched this. Sargon is just embarrassing himself and making himself look like a coward, a shill, or just a moron, not sure which. Sticks and Richard are like 2 PhDs having a debate in a college bar, and Sargon is the local drunk chick who didn't finish high school. I think that reading these comments and going by the fact that they have the most thumbs up on a video that's overwhelmingly liked, I think would strengthen her argument here. Do you agree or disagree?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I fully agree. I do think that it would be better, but arguably the best way to do this would be to actually do a content analysis of the comments that are done under the video, because even looking at the top comments, while it is definitely better than looking at just some comments, it's not the ideal that you should strive for if you're making a sort of, if you're trying at least to form this seminal work that's breaching the hidden layer of the intellectual dark web, if you catch my drift.
Sure. I think that digging into more data is good. I'm not sure if going by analyzing every comment is the best. I think that thumbs up is probably better for a variety of reasons. We would have to get really heavy into the data to really understand this. And I could be wrong, but like here's like a possible hypothesis that could throw this off, right? Perhaps people that disagreed with Spencer are more motivated to leave a comment, but people that agreed with Spencer are more motivated to thumbs up a comment, right? Things like that could throw off our analyses.
Absolutely.
Maybe we analyze 20,000 comments, 18,000 of them are shitting on Spencer, but the 2,000 that get upvoted are all of the other people that agree with him that come on, right? So, but I do agree that the data could be a little bit heavier here. I'm willing to be a little bit charitable just because we're kind of like establishing our framework and we're not really digging into the meat of the article yet. So she's just kind of like setting up her, I guess her thesis or whatever in the beginning. So I'm willing to go a little bit light, but I can understand kind of the irritation of this being pretty light on the data or the empiricism or whatever. Sure. Okay. Cool. All right. I'm going to read starting from the next page. The content creators and the AIN claim to provide an alternative media source for viewers to obtain news and political commentary outside of legacy news outlets such as cable channels and print media. With this positioning, they're capitalizing on a changing news and information environment. YouTube has become a crucial site for broadcasting political and news-related content. A 2018 Pew Research Center report found that 73% of U.S. adults visit YouTube, with the percentage rising to 94% for the 18 to 24-year-old demographic. As of 2017, YouTube fell behind only Facebook as the social network most popular for viewing news stories. Simultaneously, trust in mainstream media outlets is continually in decline, with only 32% of Americans claiming to trust the media in a 2016 Gallup poll. The AIN also relies on YouTube's ability to support a type of micro-celebrity. That is, niche celebrities who are well-known within specific communities. The platform's motto, Broadcast Yourself, encourages individuals to build audiences and promote themselves outside of the confines of legacy media outlets. YouTube also provides financial incentives for individuals to broadcast and build audiences. Specifically, YouTube has a partner program, the YPP, which is open to content creators who have received 4,000 watch hours over the course of a year and have at least 1,000 subscribers. YouTube gives these content creators a small proportion of advertising revenue for the videos they post. YouTube keeps the rest. Content creators can also relay their popularity on YouTube into monetary gains on other platforms. One of the most popular ways to do this is through a fundraising website, Patreon, where fans make monthly donations for the content they support. As a result of YouTube's partner program and outside sources like Patreon, individuals can often turn content creation on YouTube into lucrative full-time careers. Because of their high visibility and marketing potential within communities on social platforms, some content creators become influencers in their communities, people who shape public opinion and advertise goods and services through the conscientious calibration of their online persona. personae. Influencers often develop highly intimate and transparent relationships with their audiences and then capitalize on their followers by inserting advertisements for products and services into their lifestyle content. While the individuals of the AIN are not generally selling goods or services, they adopt the techniques of influencers to build audiences and sell them on far-right ideology. For this reason, I refer to these content creators as political influencers. Okay, anything in here so far that you kind of disagree with, or?
Not specifically disagree, but I think, so here's the thing, the first paragraph that you read, the second part of it, where she's talking about the Pew Center research report and the Gallup poll, that's lovely. That is the data I would love to see. That's like a really well-structured argument. The problem is this will be used as a seminal work coming the next few months, maybe even years. This will be used in newspapers, and if you look at the first part of the first paragraph that you read, she's making this sort of big claim about how the AIN functions. Then in the third paragraph, again, she's making this big claim about how the AIN functions, where it's getting its monetization from. And for the purpose of for the purpose of the research paper, it is almost entirely irrelevant if what she's saying is true or not. The problem here is that she's not providing the relevant data to back up her claims.
Yeah.
For all we know, as a completely unknowing outsider, you may be stumbling into something that's a complete fabrication. She would need some sort of work to back her statements up there, in my opinion.
Something that says that the AIN is claiming to provide an alternative media source, or something about how much money they're making, or
Absolutely.
what? Okay,
Absolutely.
gotcha.
Yeah.
So some sort of clip here. I mean, I happen to know that what she's saying is true just because I've viewed it so often, but some kind of clip of Sargon saying something like, we are the alternative media, or we are the new media that people are thirsting for. Some kind of thing like that to back her claim up would...
Certainly, even like say taking the top 5 channels subscriber-wise or views-wise and providing quotes where they specifically say, hey, we do not trust the mainstream media, we are the alternative media, we are good, they are bad, support us on Patreon. That would be great, but she doesn't do it.
Sure.
I hope that I always take you for someone who's very sort of thorough, so I hope you don't take this as nitpicky. I think it's very important to talk about this issue when discussing such a big, impactful work.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I have no problem with that. Okay, next page. Digital media scholar Crystal Abedin has noted that celebrity and influencer culture is often ascribed a presumed frivolity that leads to its underestimation among academics and journalists. However, she argues that online celebrities can often convey deceptively subversive and powerful messages. Indeed, one reason YouTube is so effective for circulating political ideas is because it is often ignored or underestimated in discourse on the rise of disinformation and far-right movements. Sorry. Yet at the same time, the members of the AIN are experiencing great success, with a countless number of their videos showing up in search results and video recommendations. That means that, increasingly, understanding the circulation of extremist political content does not just involve fringe communities and anonymous actors, instead requires us to scrutinize polished, well-lit micro-celebrities and the captivating videos that are easily available on the pages of the internet's most popular video platform. Influence is not created in a vacuum. It occurs within and propagates through social networks. Part of the way influencers build followings is by becoming nodes around which other networks of opinions and influences cluster. One of the most effective ways to network on YouTube is by referencing and including other people in video content. In fact, how-to manuals for building influence on YouTube often list collaborations as one of the most effective strategies. These guides suggest guest appearances, guest hosts, and collaborative appearances as strategies for content creators to grow exposure and multiply audiences. This report documents the composition of the AIN and analyzes the techniques used by its members to build an alternative news media system, repurposing influencer marketing techniques to impart ideological ideas to their audiences. In part 1, diagram the AIN. In part 1.1, diagram the AIN, a loose set of approximately 65 YouTube influencers across more than 80 channels. Among these channels, I document the thick network... In part 1, I diagram the AIN, gotcha. I document the thick network of guest appearances that helps to build audiences and also to move those audiences between channels and political positions. I also show how this networking is driven by and results in a set of shared ideas that progressive politics and social justice. About progressive politics and social justice. In part 2, I showcase how this network provides audiences with an alternative media source meant to counter the traditional news media. Specifically, I show how influencers project traditional journalistic credibility markers in favor of the intimacy of participatory media. I also show how this alternative media system provides influencers and audiences alike with an appealing countercultural social identity. In part 3, I show how political influencers have implemented the marketing tactics of brand influencers to impart ideological content to their viewers. These practices include ideological testimonials, channels, political self-branding, search engine optimization, and strategic use of controversy. In part 4, I examine the practice of social networking among members of the EIN and how the social network of influencers enables various types of political radicalization. This can include influencers radicalizing their audiences, each other, or being radicalized by their own audience's engagement. Finally, I conclude by considering what steps could be taken to temper the harmful political effects of the EIN. Specifically, I argue that YouTube should reassess both their monetization incentive programs and their content moderation practices. It sounds like she's just laying out what she's going to be covering. Is there anything in here that...
Yeah, it's just a very rough outline of what she's going to do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, sure, okay. Methods. To understand the EIN in depth, I analyze both the content of YouTube influencers, that is what they are saying, as well as their collaborations, who they are broadcasting with. The latter presented a significant research challenge as YouTube does not provide metadata about guest appearances. To get around this, I manually collected data from each influencer's video titles and at times video content to determine each of the guests they hosted in their content between January 1st, 2017 and April 1st, 2018. I found new influencers through a snowball approach. For each guest on an influencer's channel, I would visit their own channel, if one existed, to see who they in turn hosted. Overall, I collected data for approximately 65 influencers across 81 channels. While there is often a one-to-one relationship between influencers and channels, there is not always the case. Some influencers maintain multiple channels, some share channels, and some only appear as guests on the channels of others. I then gathered channel subscriptions and video metadata. Subscriber counts range from about 10,000 for a pro-white, gender traditionalist woman who goes by the pseudonym Wife with a Purpose to about 2.5 million for former reality television host and current YouTube talk show host Joe Rogan. I watched content from each of these channels and performed an in-depth content analysis on the transcripts for 2 of them. Overall, I watched hundreds of hours of content for these 65 content creators. At the time of data collection, this group of influencers was as close as I could get to a snapshot of the AIN. However, the boundaries of this network are loose and constantly changing. Since the time of my data collection, newly popular influencers have begun to collaborate with others in the network, and some of those I tracked in April have since deleted their channels or removed their content. The data does not represent the full extent of networking and collaboration that occurs between influencers. Many of them, for example, comment on each other's videos, they reference each other's ideas in their content, and they interact on platforms like Twitter or Instagram in addition to YouTube. In other words, the data I collected is illustrative, not comprehensive. For more detailed descriptions of the influencers discussed in the report, see Appendix A. For a comprehensive list of the influencers channels including analysis, see Appendix B. Yeah.
Yeah, there are actually 2 things that are sort of bothering me, like very much bothering me. She's confronted with this, let's be completely honest here, overwhelming mass of data. The hours and hours that people get in through live streams, even Sargon alone, is hundreds and hundreds of hours.
Yeah.
And she's very unspecific about what exactly she did. So she did 2 things, supposedly. The first one is a snowball approach. That's, I think, a very sort of intuitive approach. You ask one person, or rather you look at one node and you look at all the connections that one node has, and then you look at the connections of those connections, essentially. It's a snowball system. It's sometimes used as a telephone list, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't go in depth. If she ever looked at it, and I know for a fact after reading the report, if she ever did a second layer qualitative analysis looking at the actual characteristics of those interactions, because, and I'm going to use you as an example, later on in a picture, in a diagram, in a sociogram, you are one of those nodes. You are one of those people, essentially, quote, giving fascism a platform, giving a far-right extremism ideology a platform. And to an outsider with a sort of very flat network analysis, that is the case. But if you look at it actually from a slightly more in-depth look, with a qualitative layer, you would understand that you consistently, if I understand you correctly, have been trying to debate the alt-right, the far-right, that you've consistently been trying to dismantle the alt-right. You are not promoting them, you are actively trying to go against them. Is that correct?
Yeah. However, I haven't read this report yet, so for her purposes, it could be possible that I still fit her definition of platforming alt-righters, so I could still be a pathway to these people. It's possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, understandable. Right. Where was I? Snowball approach. Yeah, and you usually need this quantitative layer to actually understand and interpret the nodes in the research. There's a lovely paper by Brunn 2016, I think it is. If you would like to, I can give you the link after we're done talking. That actually talks in depth about how you can use snowball approaches and how important a secondary qualitative analysis actually is to understand what exactly you're looking at. Now, the second thing, which is much more bothersome to me, is her content analysis. That's the second paragraph. I watched content from each of these channels and performed an in-depth analysis of the transcripts for 2 of them. Overall, I watched hundreds of hours of content from these 65 content creators. So she just admitted she only did in-depth content analysis based on transcripts for 2 of them, even though watching supposedly hundreds of hours of material. But she doesn't exactly say how she did that in-depth content analysis, because depending on how she did it, like the results have to be reproducible. If she did a keyword analysis, for example, you would use a completely different method than if she did a sort of heuristic reading of the material provided. Even the software that she would have used, for example, MaxQDA or NVivo, would have massively impacted her findings. The fact that she doesn't disclose what exactly she did, in combination with how the entire report is structured, gives me the impression that she had a very sort of careless approach to the whole thingy. Basically, read it and write down my first impression of things.
Mm-hmm. And you've read this entire thing?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, like, I don't want to say I agree with you just because I haven't read it yet, and it's possible that she does detail that later on, but assuming you have read it and she doesn't detail that, I mean, well, I mean, that kind of, this whole thing is worthless. I mean, at that point, right?
Yes,
and I can conceive of 50 million hypotheticals that would absolutely destroy this study. So firstly, as mean as it is to say, hundreds of hours of content is actually not much compared to how many, there's probably hundreds of hours of content on my channel alone. It's possible, right? So yeah, so if you've watched hundreds of hours, so now we've got a huge issue where you have a sample of content from a large group. Now, what are the chances that you've applied some method to sample this fairly, right? Have you watched 10 videos from Sargon's channels that wholly represent his content, and how have you determined that those 10 samples do it? Because if you've only watched hundreds of hours, you're only taking either a select few videos or times from a few videos from dozens or hundreds of people, or well, I guess she said from 65 people. So I mean, like, that's the way that you select that could totally influence the way that your results appear, right?
Exactly, absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
And the fact that she doesn't disclose how she sampled those videos is a massive issue.
Yeah.
Like, I'm quite certain that this would have never passed peer review, never.
Sure.
Under no circumstance.
Of course. And then the fact that she only did transcripts for 2, is she going to describe why she picked those 2 videos to do transcripts of? Like, that's going to be really fucking important as well.
After my reading, no, she did not go in depth why she did only 2. No. Like, here's the thing. I suffer from cluster headaches. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, maybe I forgot something. Absolutely. But from my reading of it, she does not go in depth as to why she only picked 2. No.
Sure. Okay, so real quick to address a question in chat. She does say that it's illustrative, not comprehensive. This is just the first step in an analysis. So there are 2 things to deal with here. Firstly, and this kind of seems counterintuitive, but sometimes a little bit of data is actually far worse than no data. Because if we have no data, it means that we can't draw any conclusions about a certain type of content. But if we have a little bit of data, it could lead us to draw poor conclusions. So the second part of your statement, this is just the first step in an analysis. I would totally agree with that. But the problem is that this analysis is published. So like it carries with it a lot. Like if this was the first part of a larger study where she's like, this is what I did. So say for instance, she does all of this to determine how radical somebody is. If they use these types of keywords across a certain video, it's more likely to link to alt-writers or something, right? She would have to take whatever algorithm she generates from that, right? This number of keyword appearing this many times with this type of person will link to that. And then she would have to try to apply that to other videos to see if that is actually like an accurate way to assess, whether or not her hypothesis of people leading to different central people leading to alt-writers is actually accurate or not. That's what would have to happen, not just kind of a meandering through a ton of content without using any type of I don't know if you'd say like deterministic function or whatever to figure out if what she's actually collected is making accurate predictions about the data set that she's working with. That's my early opinion, right?
I would absolutely agree. As someone with a little bit of background in research, sentences like, the data I've collected is only illustrative, not comprehensive, or this is just a first entry point, a first field study, that is often used as a sort of shielding against criticism, which is a big problem actually in quite a few published works. because just because something is illustrative in nature and is attempting to be a sort of first foothold in a topic, in a phenomenon, doesn't mean that you should abandon certain academic rigors, certain academic practices. On the contrary, if you're setting the first foot into a new phenomenon, you have to be extra, double, triple careful with maintaining as rigorous practices as you possibly can, because if that first step is done wrongly, the first mistake is made, it will snowball
into a ton of wasted time, right? And I believe that you could be totally illustrative but not comprehensive. But to me, this is with no real background in this, but like what I would imagine then is you would probably pick like 10 or 15 content creators, and you would be incredibly rigorous with a smaller set of people, and then try to generate some sort of algorithm that could make predictions for people being led to alt-right videos. And then you would say, this is only a small subset of people. I feel like my data is strong and I've tested it well, but this isn't comprehensive, and it could be wrong when applied to larger data sets. But this is a pretty large data set to interact with in a pretty reckless manner.
Oh yeah, essentially what she did was, we often use this example of encountering a completely new tribe of people. If you encounter a completely new tribe of people, you work very slowly, right? You try to understand how they operate, and your first data sets will be incredibly small. You will only encounter essentially how does the language sound, do they have greeting rituals, something like that. You will not go completely overboard and try to fill in census
What is
data.
their religion? What is their life philosophy? How do they hunt? How do they raise their children? Yeah, like every single thing. You just dip in, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Also, I'm pretty impressed with how fast you can read. That is impressive.
Oh, so I got so lucky. When I grew up, I played a lot of RPGs, and there was like a lot of text. That's the only reason I can read quickly. Right. It carried me through school because I was a horrible fucking student, so that's it. Okay. All right. The Alternative Influence Network. The AIN, if it says alternative, I'm saying AIN. The AIN is a coherent, discursive system despite the seeming variety and independence of its members. In this section, I show how these figures are connected by an interlocking series of videos, references, and guest appearances. Within the AIN, a hodgepodge of internet celebrities claiming a variety of political positions apart their ideologies to viewers and each other. The boundaries between different political groups of influencers and the ideological positions they promote are often slippery. Many identify themselves primarily as libertarians or conservatives or classical liberals. Others self-advertise as white nationalists. Simultaneously, these influencers often connect with one another across ideological lines. At times, influencers collaborate to the point that ideological differences become impossible to take at face value. For example, self-identified conservatives may disavow far-right extremism while also hosting explicit white nationalists on their channels. Within the AIN, this collaboration generates a cross-promotion of ideas that forms a broader, intertextual common ground. Many of these YouTubers are less defined by any single ideology than they are by a reactionary position, a general opposition to feminism, social justice, or left-wing politics. One primary example of a shared idea that exists across the network is the concept of the social justice warrior, or SJW. The term is used by influencers across the network, from libertarians to white nationalists. It is strategically flexible. While it was initially targeted at feminists, it is often applied to any number of movements advocating for social justice, including the Black Lives Matter, the LGBT movement, Muslims, and immigrants. In some cases, influencers use it to refer to a vague conglomeration of these movements or to progressive ideas more generally. In one video, the white nationalist vlogger Colin Robertson defines an SJW as an empty-headed transmitter of progressive ideology. Oh man, did you see Sargon debate Michael Brooks, I think it was?
Michael Brooks. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't really watch debates.
Yeah, that's fine.
Of the content.
It's actually, I wish you would have cited this video because it's actually the perfect example. Sargon of Akkad debates Michael Brooks over the Middle East, which is hilarious because Sargon has no fucking idea about anything going on in the Middle East. And Michael Brooks knows way too much shit about the Middle East. And at like 5 minutes into the video, I think Sargon realizes that he's completely out of his depth. And he mentions something about how Michael Brooks advocates for like regressive ideology or regressive positions. And for the next 20 minutes of the video, Michael Brooks is just asking Sargon, what is a regressive? Can you define regressive policies? And Sargon has no definition. It's completely vacuous. It's pretty funny, but okay. Let me just finish these next few paragraphs. Mapping the connections between the influencers and the AN resulted in a complicated network diagram that demonstrates just how easily an audience member exploring seemingly mainstream conservative content can be exposed to explicit white nationalism. To understand the dynamics of exposure requires first understanding how members of this network espouse different views but are still part of a coherent ideological network. Among the 80-plus channels I cataloged for this research, I found a highly connected network of influencers across numerous ideological positions. The network includes media pundits with mainstream appeal, such as Jordan Peterson, professor of psychology at the University of Toronto with a best-selling self-help book. It also includes self-identified white nationalists such as Richard Spencer. While Peterson and Spencer have never collaborated directly, they have both collaborated with the same influencer, Carl Benjamin. In this introduction, I describe Benjamin's debate with Spencer on scientific racism, which took place in January 2018, and a live stream video from less than a year before in April 2017. Peterson and Benjamin have a friendly conversation in which they promote gender traditionalism, deny the existence of a gender pay gap, and claim that IQ is the highest predictor of success. Figure 1 highlights how tightly connected influencers in the AIN are. Each link represents at least one collaboration between two influencers. In other words, one or more instances in which one appeared in a video with another. The visualization showcases the extent to which they create a broader, highly connected, symbiotic media system. Anything here?
Right. Yeah. The obligatory comment that the first two paragraphs are again done without any data to back it up, without any actual look into what she said. Again, this is a seminal work that will have a lot of influence in the coming future.
Mm-hmm.
And the only citation that she does provide is at the end of the second paragraph, at least on page 8, that is. And that is the SJW as an empty-headed transmitter of progressive ideology. It's good that she's linking that directly to millennial vows, directly having a clip of that. That's nice. But everything that came before that is much more important, because that is the first impression that a new researcher will have of the AIN, and
Sure.
It's not backed up by anything, really.
So something here maybe would say like Sargon of Assad, who considers himself, and then a quote from a video where he says like, I consider myself a liberal, blah blah blah. It's actually really funny. I assume she did research to this. A lot of these skeptic people have actually taken those online like politics quizzes, like where do I stand? So being able to
Exactly, she could have posted that.
Did I say Sargon of Assad? Sorry, Sargon of Akkad. Having references to political positions from those tests probably would have furthered this to show the difference between like Richard Spencer is I believe he's a fascist. Like he advocates for fascism or totalitarianism. He's like a lot of the crazy, or I shouldn't say crazy, a lot of the more extreme white nationalists are generally anti-liberalism, or at least that's my impression that I get of him. So like being able to cite like Sargon of Akkad as saying I am a liberal and I do espouse classical liberal values, and then to contrast that with Spencer saying no, I don't believe in liberal values, I don't necessarily think liberalism is the way forward, would have been a much more powerful way to make this, rather than kind of the vacuous weasel words of many different positions that she never actually illustrates. Yeah.
As a fellow researcher, I don't want to sort of shit on her, but yeah, weasel words is an adequate description here, yes.
Yeah, because it seems like with a lot of these, we get into where she's almost begging the question and everything, where she says many positions, and it's like, oh, of course, many positions, they're all different, I guess, but are they? I mean, she's sneaking in the conclusion with every word, right? Instead of actually giving Absolutely. Us data, which would actually, illustrate different positions, yeah.
Now, the interesting thing is that I think that we both would, by and large, sort of vaguely agree with what she's saying there, because that is sort of the reality that we two have experienced, at least I have experienced. And as such, it's this sort of weird situation where I have to agree, where I have to sort of argue against my own lived experiences for the sake of academic rigor. And
oh, no, I 100% agree. I haven't read a single thing so far that she said that I disagree with. I've agreed with every single thing she said thus far. But the problem is that if I was to present this to somebody with absolutely no background or understanding in this whatsoever, none of the arguments so far have been made, right?
Absolutely, it's a blog.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it feels like something I'm reading on Medium. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. The Alternative Influence Network on YouTube.
Oh boy.
The graph is a partial representation of collaborative connections within the Alternative Influence Network, a network of controversial academics, media pundits, and internet celebrities who use YouTube to promote a range of political positions, from mainstream versions of libertarianism and conservatism to overt white nationalism. While collaborations can sometimes consist of debates and disagreements, they more frequently indicate social ties, endorsements, and advertisements for other influencers. Each line indicates the two connected influencers appeared in the same YouTube video during the period of January 1st, blah, blah, blah. The size of nodes are determined by the number of other influencers with whom they connect, demonstrating how much a given influencer serves as a conduit for viewers to other influencers in the AIN. The colors of nodes are determined by their total connectivity within the network, or how close the influencer is to all the other influencers.
Yeah. Now we get into the sort of the meat of the entire thing.
Damn, I'm the same size as Blair White for these people?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Jordan Peterson and Braving Ruin? Oof. I'm not quite as big as James Alsop. That's okay.
So where to start? Let's start with one of the very obvious things. Where is what's his name? Demotivator Tim. Where's Kevin Logan? Where's ContraPoints? Where are all the other YouTubers
Oh,
that
wait.
have interacted quite heavily?
The funny thing about what you're saying when you say that, whereas ContraPoints, is that it almost seems like some very hasty qualitative analysis was done and they were excluded. That's kind of the feeling I get. Do you think?
I do think so, yes. But here's the thing: if it was documented and explained, yeah.
Yeah. Oh
totally.
no, that's what. But I don't think she did do that. So I'm willing to
No,
bet that,
she
like, I'm willing to bet that, yeah, like ContraPoints probably popped up, and maybe she looked through her content and she's like, oh well, she's definitely not like a gateway to the alt-right, and then she kind of, yeah, maybe. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it becomes a sort of arbitrary decision because the two ContraPoints debates that I do have on mind, by the way, shout out to ContraPoints, I really like her stuff, that I do have in my memory is one with Blair White and with Sargon of Akkad. And her position is admittedly much more anti-right, anti-far right than Sargon of Akkad's, for example. But where do you draw the line? I mean, if here's the thing: if, as Miss Lewis is trying to portray it, that if you give the alt-right a platform, and if you give the alt-right a platform, you are promoting them. Therefore, you know, even though Richard Spencer hates Sargon of Akkad hates Richard Spencer, it's still cross-promotion. Why do you draw the line at ContraPoints? If she doesn't explain that, the first conclusion that I jump to is personal bias.
Exactly.
Sadly.
Yeah, and nothing that you said so far it would necessarily be wrong if she did do it. There may be reasons for excluding ContraPoints and not me, or excluding some people and not others, but you have to list
Absolutely.
that. Yeah, you have to elaborate on that. Otherwise, we're left guessing, which is obviously not good for a preliminary investigation into something like this.
Certainly. A second big problem here is this is only about appearing on streams together. Fine, that's a good point. But I would make the argument that one of the very, very big sort of transportation devices for viewers, for attention, is not only streaming together, collaborating together, but actually mentioning people in your video. So I have consistently gained tremendous amounts of subscribers for my size whenever someone bigger gave me a shout out. I was completely not involved with that, but when, for example, Sargon said, hey, there's my good buddy, he's a social research, Dr. Layman, go subscribe, I gained 5,000 to 8,000 subscribers overnight. That is a big sum. But it is completely and entirely omitted from this analysis.
Yeah, which is strange because I'm pretty sure YouTube automatically generates captions now that you can download for every video, doesn't it?
I don't know if you can actually download them. I would have to look into this. Sorry.
Sure. Sargon of Akkad. I just want to look real quick. I'm just curious. Debating at Sargon of Akkad. Let's see. We would do. Maybe it doesn't automatically. Does anybody know? Maybe it doesn't. Captions can be downloaded, but they are very poor quality. Oh, sure. I mean, anything would be better than nothing, but... Well, not necessarily, I guess, but... Okay. Maybe they don't automatically generate it. I'm not sure.
Also...
Sorry, you're going?
There's one thing that I would like to sort of... there's no, a perfect time to talk about this, so I'm just gonna drop it as soon as I can. One of the main problems here is that she fails to provide a theoretical framework throughout the entire paper as to why giving someone a platform leads to radicalization, leads to people, essentially if Sargon streams together with Richard Spencer, this will lead to people turning to Richard Spencer, becoming neo-Nazis. The actual state of research that we do have on hand when it comes to debates suggests actually the complete opposite. There's a paper by Schrott and Lanoux from 2012. It's something, the power and limitations of presidential debates, something about the impact of candidate performance. Everyone that's listening in can Google it. And the conclusion that paper comes to is quite simply that your candidate will win, your opposition will lose. Your preconceived notions of what is and isn't a good candidate will impact the debate so heavily on an average scale, where there are outliers who are completely, quote, rational in their choice making, right? But the absolute vast majority of people will consistently think that their candidate won and their opposition lost, except if their candidate performs exceptionally poorly. This would suggest that as long as Sargon is not a complete failure at life when talking to Richard Spencer, people would still think that Sargon by and large won against Richard Spencer. At the end of the day, those debates are by and large, from a scientific standpoint, inconsequential.
Sure. The counter argument I would provide to this is she's not necessarily talking about the fans of each of these people. She's talking about new people drafted into the YouTube platform, I guess, or the YouTube is a word I'm looking for, but that like system. I think is who she's talking about. So, for instance, let's say I'm a random memer. I don't know. Maybe I watched Joe Rogan, but I don't know anybody else. And I see Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan. I'm like, wow, this guy's pretty cool. So maybe I look up a Jordan Peterson video and I click it, and then by clicking through the recommended videos, eventually I wind up at like Richard Spencer. I think that's the argument that she's going for in this paper. Not necessarily like what fans of each person will go to or who they'll think will win, but how a stranger or a random person could be drafted into it, and through pretty innocuous conversations, end up literally watching like white nationalists talking about like the best way to like purge groups of people from the U.S.
I mean, that seems to be her argument in a sense, but I don't see the empirical backing for it actually sort of happening on any noteworthy scale. I'm not saying that there are outliers who certainly end up watching 1488 to Tiger Tank's I Mess debate, the new techno remix, right? After watching a single Sargon video, certainly. But I will argue that the absolute vast majority of people will not go down this rabbit hole, and you would have to provide substantial empirical data to, support this argument that they do, actually.
Oh, sure. I actually would argue that could I argue this? Oof, this is like, so I'm very uncomfortable with every statement I'm making, okay, because this is not my area of expertise, okay? So like, let me just preface it with that. But what I would say that type of thing is outside the framework of this kind of like preliminary investigation. What I would be interested in is like an empirical showing that these people are connected in such a way, and that by analyzing videos of certain types of content with certain types of people, that you could make a highly predicted model that some person will go from like this to this to this to this, right? That would be interesting, because then what you could do is other researchers could take that data and do, I don't know, like get certain people together and then have them browse YouTube with a certain starting point, like, hey, like if you start watching this Joe Rogan whatever debate, what videos will they click on after? Or to find some way to apply that to new accounts to see if those algorithms are as predictive as we'd want them to be. That would be really cool for like a separate paper. But maybe for something like introductory like this, I don't necessarily expect her to go that hard. She's more like laying the framework that other people would use to make these, to see if her models are predictive or not, right?
If I may, sometime pretty soon in the paper, she actually will provide I don't want to say empirical backing. She will provide air quote backing for exactly what you just described, that users will start out innocuous and end up with the Ku Klux Klan, essentially.
Oh, sure. Real quick, if she brings it up later, we can just talk about it at that point, because it might be that she fucks that up, sure. Okay.
My memory is just shit, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, cool. Okay, so scrolling down where she's highlighted some people. These graphs show examples of collaborative connections between influences of differing ideologies. These graphs show examples of collaborative connections between influencers of differing ideologies. Unfortunately, she hasn't defined any of those ideologies, and how these collaborations can create pathways to radicalization. Network Path 1 illustrates how the classical liberal, okay, she uses a word finally, Dave Rubin, and white nationalist Colin Robertson, millennial woes, are only separated by 2 degrees. Through the feminist Carl Benjamin Sargon of Akkad, who has appeared on both of their channels. This would actually be very powerful. Well, it actually is very powerful, only because I know what this is. But if she had more data here about the views of each of these people, it's actually really sad, because it feels like if she would have done a better job at collecting more types of data points, her points would actually be so much stronger. Because I know how different Dave Rubin and millennial woes are, but she doesn't. I don't see that set out yet in this paper. I don't know if she does it later, right?
To a certain degree, she does, yeah. But
okay.
I would make the argument that looking at degrees of separation is almost entirely fallacious, in my opinion.
I could agree with that, unless she can illustrate it happening to a very, very high degree. That would be something that would be very interesting to me. If, for instance, if I found out that, let's say there are 100,000 views on a Joe Rogan video where Joe Rogan is having a debate with Jordan Peterson. Let's say that I find out that 10% of people click off that video to another one afterwards, right? And then of those people that click off to another one, some percentage of those people go to a Jordan Peterson video, and then some percentage of those people go to another video. If I could get like numbers like that, that would be interesting. Now, it's not necessarily making very strong statements, but it's definitely stuff that I think would warrant like further investigation.
Certainly, one of the central problems here is that, if I understood you correctly, is that you essentially just made 1 degree of separation. What she's describing here is you're watching a debate between, say, Sargon of Akkad and Dave Rubin. Then you go to Sargon of Akkad's channel, and then you go to Millennial Vo's channel. Strictly speaking, that is a possibility, a distinct possibility, but the likelihood for a average user, simply through algorithm recommendations, through exposure, to actually do that, is, in my opinion, exceptionally low, and would again require.
Well, that's the point of the paper, right? Is hopefully she's going to give us those arguments, those numbers.
No.
Hey, no. Spoiler alert! Okay, don't spoil.
There's one more thing that I would like to mention. This is our second talk, right? Did you know that I know personally from my childhood Slobodan Milosevic, one of the sort of central people behind a certain Yugoslavian genocide?
No, I didn't know that.
Well, now you are just 1 degree of separation away from Slobodan Milosevic.
I mean, like, again, like, but going by your thing, we could perform a qualitative analysis to determine that, right? That degree of separation is meaningless in this case. However, just from my dealing with a lot of these people, and again, I'm saying this is a separate statement because I don't think this paper proves it, but I do think there are legitimate worries with how people could go from, I have actually talked about this a long time ago on my stream. I called this, I didn't have like a word for it, but it was how you get from video games to Donald Trump. And it seemed like there were very clear paths where you're into video games, you're a white man, this is like the primary demographic, you get sucked into Gamergate. All of those people from Gamergate, once that shit wears off, need other things to talk about. And all these people that got popular around Gamergate, like Mr. Medicare, and then even like Sargon and other people have like made a lot of kind of fans from the Gamergate movements, end up talking about their certain political opinions, and then that gets you on the train to like that you can like draw a very clear line from, hey, I'm kind of like a white male gamer guy, and some SJW said something at me on Twitter, and now all of a sudden I'm like a full-on devout Trump fan because he's fighting against PC culture. Like I think that those pathways do exist. I just don't know if she's going to make that argument well in here. Okay, let me finish reading this page. Are only separated by 2 degrees. Okay. Network Path 2 shows how conservative pundit Ben Shapiro is connected to white nationalist Richard Spencer through the vlogger and commentator Roaming Millennial. She has appeared on Shapiro's YouTube show and has hosted Spencer for an extended interview on her channel. For more of how these collaborations can create radicalization pathways, see section 4. And this is more of just what. Okay, give me 1 second. I got to use the restroom real quick, and then I'll be back and we can continue.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I promise not to stream gay porn on your.
Yeah, sure. If this is like really late for you or whatever, let me know too, and I don't have to keep you here or whatever.
No, I'm still functioning.
Okay. All right. You can talk to my audience. Don't say anything bad. No racial slurs. Okay. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Oh, come on. What do you think of me?
I'm just giving them fair warning. Okay. Devin, if he starts screaming the N-word, you have to mute him on Discord. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'll be right back.
Hey, Devin. I suppose. Oh, jeez. Okay. I'm always really bad with a foreign audience because I have absolutely no idea what's happening. I assume that the stream I'm watching on Twitch is not live, actually. Because if it is, I am impressed by how Destiny's playing without actually being there. Quite nice. I'm really sorry. I got nothing to entertain you with. Oh, did you know that wine was one of the most important drinks way before beer even became sort of well known and largely used in a popular setting? Wine was wine was consumed at almost any given opportunity. Even children consumed wine throughout the entirety of Europe, historically speaking. And there were many traditions of including wine even in water. And one of the theories there is that wine is a sort of disinfectant. So you would have, for example, if you wanted to drink a glass of water, you would find many recipes for calling to include a little bit of wine in said water. And one of the really interesting things is how wine was actually used as a dessert, as a sweet, essentially. And one of the oldest sweets that we know of is bread with wine. So you would get really old bread that otherwise wouldn't have found much use anywhere else. You would put it in a bowl. You would add, if you had anything, that you would add some herbs. You would add sugar if you had any sort of access to any sort of sugar sweetener, that is any sort of honey, for example. And then you would add a lot of wine. And depending on recipe, you would let that be for like, I don't know, up for a few minutes up to a few hours, and then you would have this nice mushy texture, super sweet with this wine in there. Yeah, that was a very good idea. It was also sometimes added to zabaglione, which is one of the sort of oldest puddings we actually know. And then you had this lovely, slightly pink coloration in this really rich pudding. Very, very nice, actually, very nice. Otherwise, what else do we have? Oh yeah, vinegar. Did you know that vinegar was consistently used as a disinfectant? That was really interesting. Vinegar, especially cooked vinegar, was used historically quite extensively to treat wounds so they don't infect. We often have this idea that medieval sort of surgery, I'm using this term medieval very loosely here, was like this horrible thing. You went in and you died, you immediately died. But in fact, it was not all that horrible, actually. It was, don't get me wrong, I prefer modern medicine all day, every day. But certain aspects of it were actually quite advanced, quite useful. They, on a certain level, they did understand infections, for example. And while vinegar is not exceptional, cooked vinegar that is, as disinfectant, it is an acceptable disinfectant. What else do I have? Fuck, it's so weird. Fuck, why did you leave me here alone? I don't like entertaining people that I don't know. It's weird. Okay, there's one last thing I actually do have. During the Napoleonic Wars, the British actually introduced the cavalry saber to their cavalry, as the name suggests. And while sabers were historically used in Europe quite extensively, actually, this is super fascinating, right? We do have sabers from the Huns. We have sabers from the Avars, and suddenly the saber disappears for a few hundred years out of Europe. Well, not really disappears, but it falls out of fashion completely. And you have a period of short swords, of rather broad swords, not broadswords, but rather broad swords. And suddenly, much later, the saber reappears, especially in Eastern Europe, but also later in England, in the United Kingdom. And it's fascinating because the saber during the Napoleonic Wars was not really a weapon to kill, it was a weapon to injure. And if you look at the manuscripts that were provided by French surgeons, you'll find drawings of absolutely atrocious wounds. I remember this one drawing of it was a cut to the shoulder that completely severed the trapezoid muscle, and as such, the person was not properly able to keep their head straight anymore. And it was a wound that will not kill him, that person, anytime soon, but it will get infected. It will completely disable the person from military service, and worst of all, it will drastically impact both morale and the medicinal service of the French. So at one point, get this, so at one point, an association of French surgeons gets together and issues a ban on sabers. They actually petition the UK government, the British government, and are like, dude, please don't. Sabers are bad, okay? And I don't know if the Brits ever actually responded or not, but yeah, they continued using sabers. No problem, no question asked. It was actually, yeah. Man. I'm really not getting any feedback here because I don't know where to look for the chat, I suppose. I suppose the thing running next to the stream is not really the live chat thingy. But yeah. What else is there to talk about? It's super weird to entertain an audience that I have no idea about. Super, super weird. Did you know that it wasn't actually gunpowder that made knights obsolete, but it was professional armies? One of the arguments that sort of is often made that it was gunpowder that was used en masse to completely destroy knighthood, when in fact, when we actually look at how warfare was led during the period of time, we'll find that many, quote, knights, or rather the role of the knight, incorporated gunpowder, especially Swedish riders, for example. It was very common to use cavalry in a caracole, which is essentially a cavalry unit that would ride forwards, discharge their pistols, return, reload, and rinse and repeat. Muskets, or rather arquebus or Hakenbüchsen, were used consistently alongside of bows and crossbows, and for the longest time it was quite the limbo. And what we will find, again, consistently, is armor that was actually designed to be bulletproof. In fact, there's a theory that the concept of proof actually refers to armor being bulletproof, because if you had a bulletproof armor, for example, a chest plate, it had to have a dent
I wasn't
in it,
talking.
which was done quite simply. After the smithing process, it would be put on a pedestal and shot point blank with a pistol. If the bullet bounced off, you're fine. It is proved. It is bulletproof. If it penetrated, well, you failed. This was probably done because it was so extraordinarily expensive to get armor. We often think that the sword, for example, is very expensive or something like that, but actually a later suit of armor that you will find along the lines of 1500 plus, 1550, 1600s, was extremely expensive because it fitted the entire body. Oh, thank God you're back.
Oh, yeah. Wait, I was listening.
Oh, fuck. No,
were you talking about how the katana was the best sword that was ever crafted that could cut through European steel? Yeah?
Thank you for this lovely debate. Good night.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck off.
Tell Layman if he gets under... Wait, are you, like, permanently banned from Twitter forever, too?
Oh, yeah. I am banned, yeah.
Well, welcome to the club,
my dude. Want to know why? It's actually a lovely story.
Why?
I was having banter with Dankula about the katana, actually.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I actually remember seeing this. You said something like, if you come here, I'll end you or whatever.
I said, boy, name a time and place, and I will end your existence. And even though he wrote Twitter and said it was a joke, even though I said it was a joke, even though everyone said, it was a joke, it was banter, Twitter, told me to fuck off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I talked to your audience about old desserts based on wine, about how vinegar is a disinfectant, and now we can hopefully get back to the paper, because I have a horrible stage fright.
Okay. All right. Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on, how many fucking pages is this goddamn shit? There are so many better things I should be reading right now, and this is what I choose to actually read. All right, let's go. Okay, part 1, the Alternative Influence Network. Yeah, I could be reading Das Kapital right now. Let me take a drink. As I join the intellectual dark web, yes. To understand the importance of links to the graph, consider the role that Dave Rubin plays. Rubin is a comedian turned pundit who hosts a YouTube talk show called The Rubin Report, which has over 750,000 channel subscribers. Rubin describes himself as a classical liberal, a variation on a libertarian embrace of small government and individual liberty. As the host of a number of public intellectuals and influencers, Rubin has become a focal point in a community that calls itself the intellectual dark web. Rubin describes the group not in terms of ideology, but rather as an eclectic mix of people devoted to having the important and often dangerous conversations that are completely ignored by the mainstream. His most frequent guests are the other self-identified members of the intellectual dark web group, including the psychology professor Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, a conservative media pundit. However, Rubin also hosts a range of influences outside of this subcommunity, including those with more openly extremist views. These guests include Stefan Molyneux, a talk show host who promotes scientific racism, and Lawrence Southern, a Canadian citizen journalist who has since been barred from entering England because of her vehement anti-Islam and anti-immigration activism. Vehement is a very strange word there. I don't think I've seen like a morally loaded word in here yet. That's the first one. It's very strange that she would include that, but okay. Rubin has also hosted Carl Benjamin, himself a heavily connected node of the EIN. Benjamin first made content in the early 2010s focused on criticizing feminist game critics and feminism more broadly. He grew his popularity in 2014 by broadcasting throughout Gamergate a movement of coordinated harassment against women, game critics, and designers. Since then, he has continued to grow his following with more anti-feminist, anti-social justice content. His main channel now has over 800,000 subscribers, and a secondary channel has an additional 250,000. Benjamin calls himself a skeptic, a term originally used to refer to a group of YouTube atheists. Like Rubin, Benjamin has also embraced the image of a classical liberal and often discusses his views in terms of social theory. Indeed, it is just as common for Benjamin to partake in intellectual discussions with popular libertarians and conservatives as it is for him to live stream himself shooting the shit, making fun of feminists with other gamers. At the same time, Benjamin frequently collaborates with openly white nationalist YouTubers. In his video with Spencer, Benjamin was presumably debating against scientific racism, a stance he frequently echoes. I need a citation on that. I don't believe that's true, actually. I could be wrong. Does anyone here know if Sargon of Akkad has ever espoused race realism? I feel like that's not a Sargon position at all, as much as I fucking hate that idiot. I don't think he's ever said that. However, go ahead.
As far as I know him, no, absolutely not in any shape, way, or form, no.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he actually stands against those people, but... However, yes. By participating in the debate, he was building a shared audience and thus a symbiotic relationship with white nationalists. In fact, Benjamin has become a frequent guest on channels that host such debates, which often function as group entertainment as much as genuine disagreements. This might be the most contentious paragraph so far. At the same time, Benjamin frequently collaborates with openly white nationalist YouTubers. So frequently collaborates needs a qualifier there because she's talking about one debate. Frequently collaborates with openly white nationalist YouTubers. In his video with Spencer, Benjamin was presumably debating against scientific racism, a stance he frequently echoes. The contention here... this is very strange because her earlier comments, if I was a researcher reading this, well, earlier I read that you said that everybody said that Sargon was getting destroyed in this debate, and you had YouTube comments saying so, but now you're saying he wasn't really debating even against it? It's very strange. We need so much more here to substantiate this. And then a stance sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just supporting you. Certainly. Yeah.
And then a stance he frequently echoes, that definitely needs a citation, because when she says frequently, and she said she's gone through hundreds of hours of videos, it seems like that's a footnote that would be pretty important to have. However, by participating in the debate, he was building a shared audience. That's a pretty extreme claim there. He was building a shared audience. I don't think the paper goes... I don't even think that's within the purview of this paper to discuss building shared audiences. I thought we were talking about linking people from one group to another, not necessarily building a shared audience, and thus a symbiotic relationship with white nationalists. In fact, Benjamin has become a frequent guest on channels that host such debates. We need more citations, which often function as group entertainment as much as gender disagreements. This is probably the worst paragraph that I've read so far in this. There's a lot of loaded claims in here that some of which I think are outside of what this paper is even capable of addressing.
I mean, the word frequent is there 3 times, frequently, and frequent, with no qualifier, with no footnote, with no further analysis. That is a big problem. Then the claim, he was building a shared audience. To the layperson, that is just a claim that you can just, toss around. In social research, that is... an incredibly big claim.
Holy shit, yeah, that is that's massive, right? Building a shared audience with somebody, that has extreme connotations, and a lot of consequences as well, that's very strange. The idea that just collaborating with somebody will necessarily build a shared audience is a hilariously naive way to look at online interactions. I know this very well as a Twitch streamer, and even as I guess I'm kind of a YouTuber too, okay. That's a pretty horrible paragraph.
And the paragraph, to me at least, definitely throws up the question again, where is Kevin Logan? Where is Demotivated Tim? Because if that is her qualifier, that simply being on stream together is automatically meaning building a shared audience, even if, as she's saying, Benjamin was debating against the position of his opponent.
Which she said, and she qualified that with comments saying that Sargon was getting destroyed, right? So is he building... Yeah. Oh, okay.
So I can only repeat my question again. Where is Tim? Where is Logan? Where is Counterpoint? It's weird.
Yeah. Furthermore, Sargon's collaborations with white nationalists often eschew the debate format entirely. He has hosted Jared Taylor the white nationalist founder of the magazine American Renaissance, and he has appeared on the channel with Colin Robertson, a white nationalist alt-right vlogger who goes by the pseudonym Millennial Woes. In fact, Robertson was one of several influencers to join in on Benjamin's debate with Richard Spencer, arguing in favor of Spencer's ideas of scientific racism. While in that context, they were presumably on opposite sides of the debate, Benjamin's multiple guest appearances on Robertson's channel reveal a friendly working dynamic between the two. Benjamin discussed this in one of his conversations with Robertson, saying that even though he does not embrace white nationalist ideas, in many ways we do have similar objectives. We have the same enemies, right? I mean, you guys hate the SJWs, I hate the SJWs. I want to see the complete destruction of social justice. If the alt-right took the place of the SJWs, I would have a lot less to fear. I feel like this is okay, but everything before it weakens this so much. I like that we're using like actual quotes now. I like this quote because it demonstrates. Well, but there's it's very hard because I'm trying to read this as somebody without the prerequisite background, right? I know that this is a good statement because I know these people well, but she hasn't established who these people are and what their political views are, right? Like, this is a good... If I know how different Sargon of Akkad is from Richard Spencer, which I do, I know that very well, to see him make a statement saying, well, we have the same enemies, they're all SJWs, right? So, if you guys took the... this would be a much more powerful statement in a better paper, I think.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Again, one of my problems here is... there's a thing we call first semester fluke in social research. It's a derogatory term for sort of this type of behavior where you use a single comment to back up an empirical claim. Later on, she makes a much bigger claim where she says, we don't actually know, we don't actually have the empirical research, but here's a comment that suggests this. And it's nice. It's nice. She provides this quote by Sargon of Akkad, very useful, yes. But we require actual content analysis. We require actual data on something.
Yeah, that's why I was saying the stuff before this weakens this, substantially, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Using simply comments, I can make everyone to everything. I could turn you into a fascist within 30 seconds.
Very easily.
No problem.
Whereas a qualitative analysis would obviously show that that is not the case. Ripping single quotes, Yeah. Robertson's collaborations reflect, especially when she admits that she's only completely watched two videos or made transcripts of two videos. Ugh. I'm sorry, real quick. Someone in chat said this is obviously journalistic and not academic. While that may be true, this is absolutely not presented in a journalistic manner. This is presented in an academic manner. Or at least, as a layman, that's how I would interpret this. This doesn't feel like something that's just journalistic to me. It's not written as a news article. It seems like it's written as like the starting point for future research.
Oh, absolutely. In the context that is maintained and published by the Data and Society Research Institute, which is a thing that is by now a somewhat well-known name. This can and will be used in future academic research as a not excellent source, but as an acceptable source, yes.
Wait, this was actually published?
No, this is not published. No.
Oh, okay.
But it is not completely frowned upon to use essentially think tank research. For example, certain Pew data are not specifically published.
Oh, sure.
Pew provides an exceptional quality to it. And in the same way, in the future, people might use this article. In exactly the same way.
I would argue that, and this is again with no background, and I could be wrong, something like Pew or Gallup being in non-peer-reviewed journals is probably more okay because it doesn't seem to me that those types of, I don't want to say publications, but those types of polling centers are making very broad claims. Like, it's typically just presented as like, here is some polling data, without saying like, Republicans vote this way because of this thing. I think the most I've ever seen is maybe in some Pew polls, I think they suggest like, this may be because of this thing or maybe because of that other thing, but it seems like they generally refrain from making causal connections or strong statements like that.
I would definitely support that, yes.
Sure. So something like that, I'm okay with that being like unpeer reviewed, but something like this getting a lot of attention, kind of published on just a website with no peer review, I think is not the greatest. Robertson's collaborations reflect his own complicated views on conservatives and libertarians. For example, every December he hosts a range of guests in an event he calls Millennial. Okay. Who is Robertson? Is that's Spencer, right? No, that's Richard Spencer. Who is Robertson?
Robertson is the real-life name of Millennial Votes.
Oh, Millennial. Oh, God, I hate that guy. Okay. Every December, he hosts a range of guests in an event he calls Millennial. Most of his guests are fellow white nationalist YouTuber influencers, such as Jared Taylor. However, he also hosts a number of classical liberals, YouTubers, such as Carl Benjamin, and libertarian ones, such as a vlogger who goes by That Guy T. This path from Rubin through Benjamin to Robertson and back again is just one example of the proximity of influencers in the AIN. One could just as easily trace between the conservative entertainer Steven Crowder and the pro-right anti-immigration advocate Brittany Pettibone and Martin Sellner through the talk show host and scientific racism proponent Stefan Molyneux. In the latter case, Molyneux was interviewing the couple. But you could do the same, especially because I've talked to ContraPoints, I think at least 3 times. So now she's connected by 1 degree of separation from, or 2 degrees of separation to so many of these people as well, because I've talked to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Contra. Damn, pulling you down with me. I'm like the lobster trying to get out of the. In the latter case, Molyneux was interviewing the couple about getting barred from entering the United Kingdom. They were attempting to enter the country in part to interview Carl Benjamin and the anti-Islam advocate Tommy Robinson, or from the conservative pundits Ben Shapiro and Michael Knowles, hosts on The Daily Wire, to Richard Spencer through the vlogger known as Roaming Millennial by connecting to and interacting with one another through YouTube videos, influencers with mainstream audiences on their credibility to openly white nationalists and other extremist content creators. This is both driven by and results in a shared set of ideas, which in turn helps to create the potential for radicalization, an idea I explore more in depth later in this report. It is not only these guest appearances and viewpoints, however, that knit together the AIN, they also collectively partake in certain participatory media practices. As I will show throughout the rest of this report, the influencers will draw from a larger playbook of alternative media practices and influence growing techniques. To fully understand the role and the power of this network, it is necessary to understand the strategies of alternative media outlets, the practice of building influence online. I don't really want to read the rest of it. Is there like...
I get that.
Are there like redeeming moments in this later on? Is someone in chat going to get like really triggered if I say, I'm kind of bored of this right now? Like, does this get much better later on or more substantiated later on, or is it...
Let me quickly go through my notes.
Yeah, go for it.
10 seconds.
Yep. The thing that sucks is that I agree with so many of her conclusions, like so strongly. Like these are things that I've observed for myself. Although I say that somewhat cautiously because I could be, biased myself. Although I've spent so much time in this space, I would almost consider myself like a primary source in terms of understanding it. But man, for outside reading, I feel like this is a very, very, very poor way to establish like an academic argument.
Roughly speaking, a bit later on, she goes into one thing that was super interesting to me. That is how certain content creators will play the role of the guy next door, just the average Joe, and will try to downplay the fact that they're actually financed and maintained by big think tanks. I think she provides the example of Dave Rubin, who very often will try to put on the air as just, the guy next door, just trying to further dialogue. But he actually is...
funded by the Koch brothers or whatever?
Yeah, he is more or less a megaphone for that think tank.
Mm-hmm.
That is a point that is, in my opinion, extremely important, because as much as we often like to style ourselves as the independent, non-corporate media, there are many people there that are highly corporate, highly corporate. Even Alex Jones, to provide an example, is entirely corporate in his nature, selling merchandise, providing all sorts of services. He is a company, and we have to keep that in mind. But yeah, that was the one thing that was sort of interesting to me. The rest, in its tone, in the content it provides, I would actually argue this was the better part of it, to be quite honest with you. Because at least here she provides at times a citation that actually leads to an article that may potentially be interesting, that actually leads to an article that is peer-reviewed, that at least something. Later on she becomes, in my opinion at least, even more careless than she is already.
Sure. Do you know which part of this she talks about that in? So that I was trying to control F like for Koch brothers and shit, but...
Give me one moment.
Publishers on Twitter talk to her. I don't have a Twitter account, so I can't reach out.
That should be page 17, if my notes are correct. page 17 at the very bottom. This is the case, for example, with Dave Rubin, the talk show host who gives a platform to many libertarian academics and anti-SJW YouTubers. Rubin has a particular claim to individuality, having publicly showcased his departure from the left-leaning alternative outlet Young Turks, because he frames his political views in terms of his personal ideological journey and his increased media independence. Rubin is also to present his ideas as new and in some cases revolutionary. However, this framing obscures his partnership with a well-known, highly influential libertarian organization, which provides him with many of the speakers who appear on his show. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Page 17 at the very bottom, page 18 at the very top. Yeah.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, interesting. Well, do you have any final words or anything you want to say about this?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'm disappointed by the paper. I was hoping for something really interesting, really crunchy, regardless of whether it would have supported my beliefs or not. I was disappointed. So yeah, thanks for talking to me about this. It was interesting.
No problem. Hey, if you ever want to chat, buddy, just let me know, okay? I think you're a pretty interesting guy to talk to. And you're one of the few people I've spoken to online. This is one of the highest compliments I can give, okay? You're one of the few people I've spoken to online that doesn't make me want to kill myself, so...
I knew you were going to say that.
So thanks, buddy.
Yeah, same. See you around, my man. See you around.
Yeah, I'll see you later, dude.